Dear brothers and sisters, as I said before, I love glorifying Allah. And the Quran tells us to glorify Allah and to do it often. So takbir, takbir, takbir. La ilaha illallah. We are here today, and we've assembled some of the great minds on the issues of civil rights and civil liberties. And I think it's only appropriate. It talks about civil rights and civil liberties in America. And within the Muslim community, we are finding ourselves facing a very complexing situation. Detention, the erosions of our civil rights, the vilification of our religion, the eroding of the law of due process, and basically a realignment of the constitutional balances within the American government of balances of the separation of powers. But more important than that, I think that we must understand within the framework that whatever we're going through is indeed a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said to us in his glorious Quran, do you not think that you will be tested? So we are facing this test. And like in any test, when you're a student, you know, when you take a test, you have to prepare for the test. You have to be ready for the test. You have to have the information and the knowledge that you need in order to successfully pass the test. Let me just say that America is a very interesting place. As I said to a session this morning, America sometimes reminds you of a Charles Dickens novel, A Tale of Two Cities, where that novel opens up and it says, it's the best of times, yet it's the worst of times. And certainly we go through this cycle back and forth, the worst of times and the best of times. But throughout the history of Americans' experiences, the worst of times has usually brought out the response of the best of people. I think that it's appropriate to remember that even Thomas Jefferson, President of the United States during the 18th century, when he was grappling with the contradictions that he saw within America, the contradictions that said that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all people are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and they are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But yet he himself, who had crafted this message, was still holding people in bondage. He was a slaveholder, and he wrote in his journal, I tremble for my nation when I think that God is just. I tremble for my nation when I think that God is just. And when it comes down to it, fundamentally the issue of civil rights, the issue of civil liberties is about justice. And I'm so glad, despite what any people may say, I know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is an equal opportunity employer when it comes to justice. He demands justice for everyone. And therefore, we must stand for justice. That is our responsibility. That is our requirement. That is a mandate from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we stand for justice. So I'm saying that we don't come here today as doomed merchants with loss of hope, because we realize that the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. We don't come here to say that all is lost, because we realize that there is no might or power save that of Allah. We don't come here and say and wring our hands in despair, because we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us he's closer to us than our jugular vein. So therefore, we realize that one of the things that we have to do as Muslims is to hold on to the rope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and be not divided. And that's what we need to do. We need to hold on to the rope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and be not divided. Yes, I think that the issue of terrorism has been something that's been very perplexing as it relates to Muslims in terms of our civil rights and our civil liberties. I must say that one of the things that we must really do is we must demystify terrorism by decontextualizing its symbiotic relationships through empirical analysis. Now, I know that's a mouthful, so as we say in the hood, break it on down, Brother Matty. What I'm saying is very clear, that terrorism did not begin on September the 11th. Many of us in this country have known terrorism from the inception of the birth of this country. The Native Americans, the African Americans, the Mexican Americans, the poor whites, the women in this country. Terrorism didn't begin on September the 11th, so we can't allow them. We can't allow them to use that as an excuse to deny us our God-given rights given to us by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They were given by Allah, and therefore we will let anyone take our rights away from us. Therefore, we must stand for justice. Therefore, I say to you also that you must understand this. And it's very, very clear that, you know, terrorism is a terrible thing, as I said before. But you know something? I think I'm concerned also about the terrorism that takes place when you shred the Constitution. Terrorism is a terrible thing, but I'm concerned about the terror that occurs for the poor, the widows, the orphans, the elderly, the sick. When you talk about raising and taking and spending something like $200 billion on smart bombs going to Iraq on a dumb mission. I'm concerned about that type of terrorism. I'm also concerned about the terrorism that says that we can go to way overseas and give democracy in Iraq, but we want to take the democracy right away from the Muslims right here in America. Yes, terrorism is a terrible thing. But I think the greatest terror is an unloving heart. The greatest terror is an unloving heart and the inability to have compassion for your fellow human being. So I will say that we have a good panel assembled here today, and we are going to examine this whole concept of civil rights and civil liberties in America. And one of our very first speakers will be Myra Verheyden Hilliard, who is one of the co-founders of the Partnership for Civil Justice and a member of the Answer Coalition. Right now, please give a warm welcome for Myra Verheyden Hilliard, attorney at law.
Sisters and brothers, thank you for having me here. It's been an honor for the last 2 days to meet so many people who have been here and who are standing for justice and who are fighting for justice. I'm Myra Verheyden Hilliard. I'm an attorney and co-founder of the Partnership for Civil Justice in Washington, D.C. And I litigate civil rights and constitutional rights cases, frequently against the federal government and local government authorities for violating human rights. I'm also a member, as Mahdi said, of the International Answer Coalition, which stands for Act Now to Stop War and End Racism. And we are a coalition of organizations throughout the United States that are fighting to bring justice to the people of the United States, as well as fighting for justice worldwide. I want to talk a little bit about the origin of the concept of civil rights and civil liberties in America. In the United States, we have what I cherish, which is our Constitution and our Bill of Rights. But many people, when you think about the Bill of Rights, you hear the term the Bill of Rights, people think it's a concept of rights that are granted to us. But in actuality, we hold all human rights inherently as people in this world. And what the Bill of Rights is a bill of restrictions on government conduct. It is a list of restrictions to keep the government from conducting government tyranny against its own people. And what we are witnessing in the last year and a half under George Bush and John Ashcroft is a swift and vicious assault on those rights that people hold, those rights that we have inherently, by trying to lift the restrictions that are placed on government conduct. In October of last year, a massive document was passed through Congress swiftly called the Patriot Act that I'm sure most of you are very familiar with at this point. But just to talk a little bit about what the Patriot Act includes, it empowers the government to engage in surveillance and searches, including covert and secret searches of our homes and offices. That means the government can go in to our private homes, to our offices, and search them without our knowing about it. And the government asserts it has the right to seize materials without our knowing about it. That they don't have to come and show you the warrant, which is what they used to have to do. That they can just go in and do this, and you will not know about it for some substantial period of time. You will not be able to challenge that warrant. That is a violation of our Fourth Amendment rights, of the restriction on the government of unreasonable searches and seizures. The Patriot Act authorizes routine monitoring of internet use and email activity so that the government is reading our personal communications, our political communications, our social communications. It allows them to gain access to private personal information, from financial records to educational records to records on library use, on bookstores, on consumer purchases. They are creating what's called the Total Information Awareness Office, in which they're creating mass databases that look at everything that we buy at the drugstore, the groceries that we buy, the books that we take out of the library, whatever we charge, all of the different transactions that you imagine engaging in every day, whatever you do that is recorded into a computer system, is data warehoused by private corporations, and the government is now accessing that material to create profiles on us. But why do they need to look at what we're reading? And the FBI has been caught going to libraries and seeking their records, seeking our records to see what kind of books we're reading. The Patriot Act treats nonviolent political activity as terrorist activity. It authorizes seizing assets merely upon the unilateral designation by the Bush administration that any group or person is a terrorist or is associated with a terrorist. It nullifies the secrecy of grand jury proceedings and investigations, and it allows the government to disseminate confidential information to different government agencies. They're doing mass sharing of information, crossing over the lines between investigation and intelligence gathering and criminal activity. And it allows the CIA to get back in the business of spying on people in the United States, which they were barred from doing. The government also now asserts, under George Bush, that they have the right to take actions not only against non-citizens, which in the Patriot Act, John Ashcroft authorized himself to detain non-citizens indefinitely at his discretion. But now George Bush says he has the right to detain any citizen of the United States as well, so that we can see this increasing assault upon everyone in the United States. George Bush says he has the right to designate any person as an enemy combatant, as an unlawful combatant, and therefore take that person, put them in a jail, not even charge them with anything, not tell them what they're accused of, not allow them to defend themselves, not allow them to see lawyers, not allow them to ever go before a judge, to be put in a cell and never see the light of day again until George Bush decides that the war on terrorism is over at his sole discretion. And that is tyranny. That concept is nearly dictatorial, and that is a very frightening direction. The government is now openly shifting its law enforcement authority from being focused on criminal activity, the idea that law enforcement is to stop and to apprehend and to prosecute people for breaking the law, and taking the resources of federal law enforcement and turning it into a counterintelligence model. And what is a counterintelligence model? That is the same model of law enforcement that was used by J. Edgar Hoover throughout the 50s and the 60s and into the 70s. It is a model that was roundly rejected by the people of the United States, and even by the Senate of the United States in the 70s, when the abuses of that type of mechanism came to light. And it's helpful to look back at that time, because during that period of time, the US government had programs, including one called COINTELPRO, which was a counterintelligence program, which is very much what they're resurrecting now. And after decades of abuse, the Senate held hearings, the US Senate held hearings, and the Senate's own words said what we need to remember today, which is that when these type of security, so-called security mechanisms are put in, they always say it's because it's a national emergency or there's a threat. But in reality, these are mechanisms of social and economic control. That is what the US Senate said in the 1970s, and that is as true now as it was then. We keep hearing that there's this debate between security and liberty, and that we need to protect people in the United States and therefore deprive others of their liberty. But all we need to do is listen to the very words of the Bush administration to know that that's a lie. In November of 2001, after the Patriot Act was passed, a senior Bush administration official told the Washington Post that none of the changes that had been ordered by Ashcroft would have prevented the horrible attacks of September 11th. In December of 2001, a senior Bush administration told the Washington Post that all of these mass changes in law enforcement authority were not being driven by problems that prosecutors or investigators were having, that they just felt that this was a good time to get everything. And in January of 2002, a senior Bush administration official told the Washington Post that everything a war lets you do, the president has been seizing on. So let's think about what that means. What does that mean, seizing on? It's a good time to get everything. What is the everything that they're getting? And why are they doing this? Because the war at home on civil rights and civil liberties is the domestic component of a global war drive. We have an administration that has put out a national security strategy that says, they put out a paper in September of this year that stated that it was the direction of the United States to become such a mass global superpower that no one would challenge them, that they would be able to enforce their economic market system, enforce their policies, enforce their social agenda around the world using military might, and make sure that no one would rise up in opposition. And with that, the administration has started its global war drive, starting in Afghanistan, now going to Iraq where everyone knows that Iraq has nothing to do with September 11th, and yet the administration is insisting that it is going to wage war against the people of Iraq who have suffered so much for the last 12 years under genocidal sanctions, and that they will wage war and they will occupy that country and they will gain another foothold in the Middle East, and that will not be the beginning and that will not be the end, because this government under George Bush has indicated that they believe they have the right of global conquest on a worldwide scale. And what will happen? People will resist. People will resist around the world, as people always do when they must fight for their liberation. And people will resist here in the United States. And what the government did is, as it launches its global war drive of conquest, it has launched an assault on people in the United States, stripping people of rights and liberties, frightening people, terrorizing people, raiding and detaining. And why do they do this? To shut people down, to stifle dissent. They started by attacking Muslim, Arab, South Asian communities because they could demonize those communities. They have demonized people who have done nothing wrong. They demonize people based on racism. They demonize people based on religious bigotry. And then they institutionalize these mechanisms of repression, the detentions, the raids, the secret evidence, the closed hearings, and they expect everyone else in the United States to be silent and allow it to happen. And once those mechanisms are in place, and once people are terrified and are quiet, then the government will be able to go forward, because the one thing that can stop the United States government is the power of the people in the United States. Because all power remains in the hands of the people. The government cannot exist without authority of the people of the United States. And if the people of the United States choose to stop what they believe to be illegal and wrongful conduct, just as the people of the United States took to the streets to stop the illegal war in Vietnam, that can alter the course of the U.S. government. It can alter the course of history. And this government wants to try and stop that from happening. When you look at the consolidation of power that is happening now within the Bush administration, the president has sought to take power from the other branches, the legislative branches, the elected officials, to take power from the judicial branches, and to give all that power to himself. He's trying to consolidate power within the executive branch, and that's what we've seen in the past year. And this mass consolidation in many ways is reflective of the mass consolidation we see of corporations and companies around the world, where you have more and more corporations that merge. You have single power that dictates the lives of so many people, not just in the United States, but around the world. But people can only take so much before they fight back. And people will necessarily fight back. People are fighting back. When you have economic terrorism, and as Brother Mahdi was saying before, the word terrorism that gets used now and thrown around now to demonize people or to define one particular political movement as somehow bad or evil, but yet other acts go unchallenged. I mean, that the U.S. government wants to define consistently the Palestinian struggle as somehow a terrorist fight, and yet this massive amount of U.S. aid that goes to support Israeli-sponsored terror against the people of Palestine goes without any question mark from this government. When you look at the use of the word terror, it helps also to stand back and look at what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said in 1967, 1 year to the day before he was assassinated. He spoke at Riverside Church, and he said that the greatest purveyor of violence in this planet is my own government. And that was a powerful statement. It was a time when he came out to say that it was impossible to fight for civil rights, it was impossible to fight against poverty in the United States without also addressing what was happening worldwide, that these were struggles that were linked because these were people's struggles, that it was necessary for the civil rights movement and for the anti-war movement, for movements for justice to come together because it is a common fight for human justice and for liberty. And a year later, he was assassinated. That is the fight that we must be waging now, and that is the common struggle that we must be forging now. Because all of us are united in the fact that we believe deeply in justice and we believe in liberty. And we may come from different positions and different perspectives, but all of us believe in our hearts that we have an obligation and a need to set things right. And as we come together and fight to make things right and stand shoulder to shoulder to make things right, we have the ability to do just that. The government can't conduct this kind of program if we don't let them. Someone yesterday asked me, when will this end? As if, in a way, there's sort of a hope that there's a natural pendulum swing. But there isn't a natural pendulum swing. This is not about Republicans or Democrats. It's a Republican administration that is taking these actions now, but the Clinton administration put into action punishing people for supposed material support to their designated terrorist organizations. It's the Clinton administration that instituted secret evidence. And the Democratic National Committee last week announced that their new program and their plan for the upcoming elections is to argue that the Bush administration isn't strong enough on terrorism in the United States. So now what are we going to have? We're going to have Ashcroft and George Bush trying to suppress people here in the United States and deprive people of their rights and liberties, and the Democrats are going to come in and say, no, we want to do it more than you are? That's not where we're going to find change. That's not where we can place our hope. And As a lawyer, I litigate. I go into the court system. I believe in justice. I believe in the hope that the Constitution will prevail. And there have been some judges of conscience who have written beautiful opinions, standing up for what we believe in. But I don't believe that I can sit back and hope that it will just work out okay and the courts will just take care of it. After all, the Supreme Court is the court that placed this president into office. I don't believe that any of us can hope that it's going to end, and I don't believe that any of us should make the mistake of saying that maybe the government just doesn't understand, maybe if they just, understood a little bit better that we didn't do anything wrong. Government knows what it's doing. This is an institutionalized program. There is not something from the side or above. It's not a judge that's going to change everything. It's not naturally going to end, but it will end the way that all struggle has occurred in the United States. All the things that we cherish and hold dear, including the Bill of Rights, all the things that I value, the end to formal apartheid in the United States, the right of people to unionize and to have 8-hour workdays and decent working conditions, the right of women to vote. All of these came not because the government gave them to the people. They came because a critical mass of people fought loudly and publicly and in the streets when they were compelled to shoulder, changing the course of the government and forcing the government to comply with our will, because the government must comply with our will. Ultimately, this is a fight about people versus power, because that's what it always is. But the power is in the people, and it's in the people when we join together in collective action. I want to take just this last moment to talk about an upcoming event and the coalition that I'm on the steering committee of, the Answer Coalition, which I'm very proud to be part of. That is the organization that called and organized the mass demonstrations in April 20th of this past year, which was the largest demonstration in support of Palestine and calling for a free Palestine in the history of the United States, when over 100,000 people came to Washington, D.C. and stood in George Bush's backyard and demanded a free Palestine. And that happened because all of us came together in coalition. It happened very much because of the work of Brother Mahdi, who was instrumental in working with the Answer Coalition and for whom I have most enormous respect because of that work together. Civil rights and civil liberties in the United States, in which we say as a people, we own this country, we control the direction of this country, we will not allow you to go in this way, we will not allow you to deprive us of our rights, because we own those rights. And it's our voices that will make that difference. I hope that everyone here, as they go back to their communities, will contact the coalition, will contact Brother Mahdi, will begin organizing. It's in 3 weeks. All you have to do is get buses, talk to your communities, talk to your friends, and come. Because when you stand out there, and I'm sure many of you were there on April 20th, and you stand there shoulder to shoulder, that power is enormous. It's powerful. And we don't begin and end there. It's not just about rallies. It's about forging this type of community and this fight for justice side by side, so that we can control our destinies, so that we can build a life for our children that is the life that they deserve. Thank you.
Thank you, Myra, for those inspiring remarks. I hope that, inshallah, that we will go back home and organize, and that we will be out in significant numbers for January 18th to stand up and say that we are not going to carry, they've been terror baiting us with this whole terrorism business, the Raleigh factor, Fox News, talking heads, Hanley and Cone, all of that type of stuff. But I would hope that we will take a principled stand as Muslims and say that we are not going to carry the baggage of terrorism, but rather we're going to lift up the banner of peace, justice, and freedom. Our next speaker, we talk about political giants, and then there are political giants. He has been a tireless worker in the field of civil rights, justice. He has also been a leading figure in academia in terms of political science. He's been advisors to many important people in the political arena. Professor, good friend to our community, good friend to any community that's struggling for justice. I would like for you to give a warm greeting to the Executive Director for the Center for Constitutional Rights, one of the oldest legal civil rights organizations in America. Please give a big warm hand to its Executive Director, Dr. Ron Daniels.
Assalamu alaikum. Well, let me express my profound appreciation to my dear friend Imam Mahdi Bray for inviting me here. I'm engaged in a lot of very, very difficult work, and really only for him, given his reputation as a champion for freedom for all people that I've come to know and love, would I really sort of break into some really critical work I'm doing to come and be here. And I'm very honored to be here. I'm very delighted that I was able to come, because it's important at this moment in history that those of us who have fought for civil rights and civil liberties in this country stand tall and stand firm when we see any sector of the American population or any sector of people, period, being attacked. It is my duty, it is my obligation, it is my responsibility. As Martin Luther King said, an injustice to anyone anywhere is an injustice to everyone everywhere. And so I'm honored to be here today to stand with you. I'm actually going to be pretty brief because Myra has covered some of the points that I wanted to cover, and I don't think we need to be redundant or to repeat those points. Suffice it to say that the Patriot Act, the USA Patriot Act, as she outlined, is a severe threat to the civil liberties of all of us in this country. It is in fact really designed to take us back to an era, as she also mentioned, of COINTELPRO, where J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI and the CIA was spying, particularly on the civil rights movement, the black liberation movement in this country. We have people who are political prisoners in this country right now because they were surveilled and their characters were attacked, and they were illegitimately and illegally detained in this country. One thinks of today, Mumia Abu-Jamal, who's on death row on a bogus and a set of charges that are not correct. One thinks of our brother Geronimo Pratt, who was in jail for 27 years. 27 years he was in jail because he was a member of the Black Panther Party for self-defense, because he wanted to really expand the rights of black people and working class people in this society. He spent 27 years of his life in a jail cell because he was willing to stand up for liberty and freedom in this country. So in other words, an Imam Jamil Al-Amin, who was one of the great figures in the civil rights movement, also known or formerly known as H. Rap Brown, now, also incarcerated. So this is a moment of grave crisis in American history. We at the Center for Constitutional Rights immediately sprang into action after 9/11 because there was tremendous fear. Because what happened in the American mind, and you have to understand that unfortunately we have tremendous amounts of racism in this society. We have a tremendous amount of religious bigotry in American society. I recall the Oklahoma City bombing that took place. The first reports that came out after Oklahoma City were these images of a brown-skinned, Middle Eastern-looking person supposedly was involved. When it was all over, there was no brown-skinned, Middle Eastern-looking man. It was one of these all-American European white folks who was involved in the despicable act that took place in Oklahoma City. My point is, there's a way in which this country still has not purged itself of racism and religious bigotry. The fact of the matter is, this nation was founded on the principles of religious tolerance. And it means that any religion that seeks to come to this country and be a part of it should be welcome as Americans, because that is what America was founded upon, religious tolerance. So everyone should be welcome to participate in these United States of America. But what we find is, as we at the Center for Constitutional Rights found, is all of a sudden masjids were being defaced. People whom people thought were Muslims, or thought were quote-unquote Middle Eastern people, or thought were from Southeast Asia, or from the Indian subcontinent, were being attacked and harassed on the streets. All of a sudden, this Bill of Rights that Myra talked about no longer was being extended to people who were immigrants. And in fact, thousands of people have been detained under Ashcroft, and in many instances they've been separated from their families, their loved ones, and under the guise, again, of this war against terrorism. And as people are being released gradually, and we're beginning to find out who they are, not one real piece of evidence related to 9/11 has been extracted from most of the people who have been detained. The overwhelming majority have been detained innocently, without due cause. And we in the black community know something about that. We know something about being racially profiled, harassed by the police just because we're black. Amadou Diallo gunned down in his vestibule simply because he was black. And so we know something about this. We know what it feels like simply to be stopped on the highway because of our skin color, or not to be able to walk freely in the streets in the South or even in the North today because of our skin color. We know something about that, and that's all the more reason, again, why I'm hoping that the African American community will fight against racial profiling against anybody, because racial profiling, ethnic profiling, and religious profiling is wrong. It is absolutely wrong and should not be tolerated. And so we've been counseling people on their rights. We've been engaging in litigation. We have some of the most important cases dealing with the issue of the detainees in Guantanamo, the detainees in New Jersey. We are fighting those cases because we think that they go to the heart of the Constitution. We think that Bush and Ashcroft are ripping the heart out of the Constitution of the United States. I want to close, however, by talking about a broader set of points that Myra was kind of ending on, because we know that we have threats to our civil liberties. We know that civil rights are being threatened. But I want you to also think about it in terms of what side we ought to be on, because there's a way in which sometimes if the threat to my rights subsides or is over, then I don't really concern myself with anybody else's rights. See, what we have to do in this crisis is understand that in American history, there are really two sides. Two sides. There have always been those who have tried to keep America constrained to just a few people, mostly white men with privilege. That's from the very beginning of this Constitution of the United States, which was not for Native Americans because they were dispossessed. The land was taken away from Native Americans. In a real sense, the land we stand on right now belongs to the Native Americans. And we have benefited, not intentionally, but nonetheless we benefited from their dispossession, and they are still suffering in these United States of America. So as we endure the pain of being profiled, we have to also understand and remember the plight of Native Americans, because if we're going to make America better, the theme of the conference, a better world, then we have to identify with the struggling people wherever they are. White women, period, could not vote. Black folks were enslaved by and large. Even white men who didn't have property at the beginning of the Constitution could not vote in this country. My point is that America has always been an experiment. It is an imperfect union. Our task is to try to hammer out the broad tapestry of what it can become and to make it a more perfect union. So we have to stand on the right side of history. So when we see Ashcroft and Bush up there, We're looking at two leaders who are part of a political tradition that has never, ever fought for the inclusion of average, ordinary human beings. Never. They've always been on the wrong side of history. They've always stood for the corporations and for the powerful, for the rich and the wealthy. They've never stood for the little people. They've talked about the immigrants coming only so that they could exploit their labor. The Chinese came, they exploited their labor. Mexicans come across the border back to their country because, in fact, in 1848, land was seized from Mexico. And they're treated like dirt. Alternately, they're needed to do the dirty work. And then when it becomes politically expedient, they talk bad about them in order to get elected to political office. I'm saying this because a part of what we have to understand is that this struggle is a struggle about the heart and soul of America. It is also a struggle about the heart and soul of this world. What kind of world do we want? And we have to stand on the right side of history. I say that because I see people who sometimes come to America and they align themselves with the wrong people. They align themselves with the Bushes and Ashcrofts of the world instead of identifying with those who have suffered, who are still suffering, but who still are committed to making America a glorious country where everybody, irrespective of religion, of gender, ideology, if you will, can come and make this country a bright beacon of hope and promise in the world today, as opposed to being feared or disrespected or hated, because the business of government in this country has often been business, as opposed to fighting for the human rights of everyone else around the world. And so I just wanted to emphasize those points as I close, that when we look at the war against terrorism, it really masks an agenda. Bush and Ashcroft have an agenda, and it's primarily to enrich themselves and the people who are around them. They're from the energy industry. You know, and it's interesting when the talk came out about Iraq, the headlines before that was about Enron. It was about Tyco, IMCO. It was about corporate scandals and greed and corruption on Wall Street. All of a sudden, instead of the American people focusing on those issues and the fact that poverty is increasing, homelessness is increasing, the budgets of states are now in deficit. Now they're looking at a created enemy called Saddam Hussein over in Iraq, who supposedly has chemical and biological weapons, as if the United States of America doesn't have chemical and biological weapons. What entitles the United States of America to be the only nation in the world to have chemical and biological weapons? The only nation, in fact, that has ever used a nuclear bomb terroristically to bomb Nagasaki and Hiroshima, where thousands of innocent human beings were destroyed. That happened by these United States of America. And now we see Korea. It says, yes, we got weapons. We got them. We have them. But the United States is not getting ready to march off the war against North Korea. Our eyes have been focused on the war against terrorism, but what's really happened is the people who are about to perpetrate terrorism on people in this country, because you're talking about people within the federal bureaucracy being pushed out their jobs so they can be privatized. Just today, we read in the newspaper that there's 750,000 people whose unemployment insurance is running out. Bush is not about to do anything about that, and if he does, it'll be just a little bit. So my point, again, as I take my seat, is that yes, on January 18th, we have to be in the streets fighting against the war against terrorism, fighting against the war against Iraq, but we also have to be upholding the vision of a Martin Luther King who said we must have an economic bill of rights, that everybody in this society should have a job with good wages, that we're entitled to a clean environment, that we're entitled to a quality education, that we're entitled to health care. Everybody. This nation has 40 million people who do not have health care. Homelessness is on the rise. So as we fight against terrorism, as we fight against the war against Iraq, let us not forget that we must also simultaneously, as you join in this struggle, as you must join in this struggle, cannot be, should not be a part of this society without registering to vote, without getting yourself engaged in the process, because once you become involved in the process, all of a sudden people who are disrespected become respected. When you use your ballot, when you demonstrate in the streets, and when you use your dollars, 15,000 people here at the Hyatt Regency complex, that's economic power. People who really claim they don't like you, who claim they don't understand what your religion is all about. They do understand green. They understand what the color of money. And you can use that in order to parlay yourself and to demand respect and respect for others. So I didn't mean to even speak that long, but I got a little bit of that Baptist tradition in me, and sometimes I get up and I have to say these things. But I am honored to be here. And you can count on the Center for Constitutional Rights to be on the right side. You can count on us to fight with you and on your behalf and to share whatever resources we have and whatever ideas we have. And we expect you to do the same thing as we march arm in arm to make America the nation that Langston Hughes, the great black poet, said had never been. America has never been, for me, the America that it ought to be. But that doesn't mean that I give up hope. It means that we have a job to do. And with the vision of human rights for all and a peace and justice foreign policy, we will in fact one day see a nation that will lead the world not by might, not by its arms, not by its weapons, but because we are a just and decent nation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Daniels. Our next speaker has worked tirelessly, struggling on behalf of the civil rights of Muslims. He is a Muslim. And I can remember when I first saw him working on this thing called secret evidence. Nobody wanted to talk about it. I can remember when we were saying that, listen, fellow brothers and sisters, there's something strange happening. Not only are we being profiled just for our religion and the way we dress or the way we practice our religion, but we're being profiled for our thoughts. We're being profiled for our speech. And it was Sammy Elarian who, when many times he would come to different conferences, they would just give him a little side session talking about this most important issue that was happening way before 9/11. Like I said before, this stuff didn't start 9/11, but way before 9/11, he was trying to wake our community up and say, look, something is going on here, and we need to get in touch with it. And many of us, sadly, we ignored it. We put it to the side. We said that perhaps maybe our sooks at our conventions were more important than this, or that maybe a session where we can just all talk about how good we feel and how good we are, you know, is more important than talking about how we're being mistreated and how people are violating the principles of justice, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala demands. But he didn't give up. He kept on fighting. As a result of his fight, he was dismissed from his position as a university professor in Florida. And some of the prominent national newspapers said that his case was the greatest case of academic freedom since the Angela Davis case here in America. But he's not stopped fighting. He continues to fight for the rights of all people, Muslims, non-Muslims. He is indeed a good friend for fighting and on the side of justice. Please welcome our brother Sammy El-Arian. Takbir! Takbir!
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. My dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. If you get nothing out of this convention, I hope we can get this. That the Muslims in this country are facing one of the most important decisions, I believe, in their lives in this country, and that is whether or not to engage in the fight for their civil rights. Your future is going to depend on it. The future of your children and the next generations are going to depend on it. No minority, no ethnic minority in this country has ever been empowered politically or culturally until they won their civil rights. That's true for the Catholics, that's true for the Jews, that's true for the African Americans, it's true for every other minority. We can't hide our heads in the sands, we can't run away, and we can't hide. We have to face this reality, and the sooner we face it, the better it would be. After living the first year of the so-called war on terrorism, it's not an exaggeration to say that this administration's program has been to launch one of the most wide-ranging and multifaceted attempts to seize executive power and to attack civil liberties in the history of the Republic. People talk about the previous wars, the civil rights, World War I and the Palmer raids, World War II and the Japanese internment camps, the Cold War and the McCarthy era. We're not resorting back to McCarthyism, we're resorting back even to Stalinism in this country. I'd like to paraphrase Pastor Martin Niemöller, who wrote during the Nazi Germany era, talking about the apathy of the people, the fact that they didn't speak up, they didn't rise up, they didn't resist, they didn't fight back, in which he says, they first came for the communists and I wasn't communist, they came for the Jews, I wasn't a Jew, they came for the Catholics, I was Protestant, they came for the trade unionists and I wasn't one. And now we say first they came for the Arabs and I didn't speak up because I wasn't an Arab. Then they came for the Muslims and I didn't speak up because I was a Christian. Then they came for the immigrants, detaining them indefinitely solely on the certification of the Attorney General, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't an immigrant. Then they came to eavesdrop on suspects, consulting with their attorneys, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a non-citizen. Then they came up to inner homes and offices for unannounced sneak and peek searches, and I didn't speak up because I had nothing to hide. Then they came to reinstate COINTELPRO and resume the infiltration and surveillance of domestic, religious, and political groups in mosques, churches, and synagogues. And I didn't speak up because I was no longer participating in any of these groups. Then they came to arrest American citizens and hold them indefinitely without any charges and without access to any lawyer. And I didn't speak up because I was never arrested. Then they came to institute TIPS, the Terrorism Information and Prevention System, recruiting millions of citizens to spy on other citizens, and I didn't speak up because I was confused. Then they came for anyone who objected to government policy because it only aided the terrorists and gave ammunition to American enemies, and I didn't speak up because I was afraid. Then they came to me, and by that time there was no one left to speak up. Since September 11th, this nation has been at war not just with the ugly face of terrorism, but also with the ugly face of intolerance and bigotry. We're told that this is a war against terrorism, but any objective observer would see that this is much more than just war on terrorists. It has been transformed to become war on Islam and Muslims in this country. And the sooner we realize this, the easier it will be for us to fight back. I remember during the scare, the anthrax scare, when 5 people had already died, millions of people were afraid to open their mail. And the current majority leader of the United States Senate, Senator Bill Frist, was interviewed on TV. And he was asked, did he think that this is terrorism? And his answer was, we're not sure if this is terrorism. What he was saying in code, that he is not sure that those who have perpetrated the anthrax are Arabs or Muslims. So we have to confront this bigotry and this intolerance. When Mr. Ashcroft was announcing halfway around the world through a satellite uplink the arrest of the Muslim convert, Mr. Jose Padilla, he was nowhere to be seen when Mr. Robert Goldstein was arrested with a small army arsenal in Florida with a plan to destroy 50 Islamic centers. Even the governor of the state of Florida called Mr. Goldstein mentally disturbed. And the media called him a podiatrist, a foot doctor, not a terrorist. Would like to know how many mentally disturbed people and podiatrists exist who have 40 machine guns, rocket launchers, bombs, C4 explosives, napalm, timers and wires, and ready to strike with detailed plans against houses of worship and education centers. Some people would like to confuse patriotism with zealotry or nationalism. To be patriotic is to question government policy at times of crisis. To be patriotic is to stand up for the Bill of Rights and for the Constitution. To be patriotic is to speak up against the powerful and to be the voice for the weak and the defenseless. To be patriotic is to be willing to pay the price to stand up for your positions. To be patriotic is to challenge the Patriot Act. It's a misnomer, and we should never rest until we get it repealed. The good news is that in 2005, in December 2005, this act would have to be voted again by Congress. And we need to mobilize, organize, educate the masses so that by that time, this Patriot Act will be history. What does it do? It threatens the right of free speech and the First Amendment. It threatens the Fourth Amendment and the prohibitions against unreasonable search and seizure. It threatens the Fifth Amendment by nullifying due process, by allowing indefinite detentions without trials. It threatens the Sixth Amendment and the right to public and prompt trials. It threatens the Eighth Amendment, which protects against cruel and unusual punishment, including solitary confinement for months upon months. It allows for widespread wiretaps and internet surveillance without judicial supervision. It allows the Attorney General to designate any person or any group to be a terrorist without any hearings or due process. It allows the FBI with total access to any data which may exist in any system, including medical and financial records. It allows the CIA even to spy in this country, and the targeting of people because of their race, ethnicity, or religion. Brothers and sisters, what we need to do is, first of all, to mobilize ourselves, to understand the system in this country. And we should ask the officials, by building coalitions, that we, as people living in this country, are proud to live here, and then there should be no double standard. People should not be looked at as two different classes. And even those people who are connected with Al-Qaeda today, we found one justice applied to John Walker Lynn, who got a deal from the department, the government, and another one for Jose Perea and Yasser Hamdi, who are being held indefinitely without being charged with a single crime, although they are US citizens. Some people will argue that this is really not against citizens, this is against immigrants, against illegal people. But the fact of the matter is that last November of 2001, Mr. Bush stood up and said these military commissions will not be applied to citizens. Yet, last year we saw how American citizens have been labeled as enemy combatants, being held in an unending war and terrorism. By being labeled as enemy combatant, there is no end in sight for this so-called war on terrorism. Practically speaking, they are for life without ever being charged with a crime or even seeing an attorney. We need to tell people that we should hold people responsible for their actions, not treat them with guilt by association as is happening today. The raids that have taken place against Muslims, whether it's in Virginia, where women were being held and handcuffed without being allowed even to wear their own scarves, where people in Dallas were taken in the early morning with their own pajamas, not even allowed to change their clothes. And we found what kind of charges they have been charged with. A person has been charged with 33 counts, and yet when they presented the so-called evidence to the judge gave him bail without paying a penny based on his recognizance. That tells you how strong that case is. Second, the government should not be able to imprison people without public accounting. The courts have to be open to the public. Thank God we still have checks and balances in the system. But the judges will not be able to make these decisions unless there is a movement, unless there is people who are speaking up everywhere, going to the media, going to the editorial boards, speaking to your politicians, demonstrating in front of the government buildings, having a mass movement, a civil rights, where the Muslims are the first line of defense, because you can't build coalitions if we're not willing to stand up for our rights. And thirdly, we need to remind people that this Constitution does not give rights simply to citizens. The only difference between a citizen and a non-citizen is a matter of vote. But every single person who lives in this country is a precious human being who is endowed by the Creator with all the rights. We can't differentiate upon these rights because someone may or may not be a citizen. And the Constitution speaks of persons and not of citizens. I'd like to talk briefly about our experience, because our experience demonstrates that those who stand up and fight can win. Not because we won, because the struggle is long and hard. We had few bumps along the road. We were able to score few wins along the road. But the beauty about this country that doesn't exist in other countries, especially coming from Muslim countries, is that in other places you can't even fight back when there is injustice and oppression. The beauty here is that you can stand up, you can fight, and yet, and better yet, you can win. We saw this on the secret evidence. People were telling us, this is a losing fight, you can't even get to that. What are you talking about? This is a government, billions of dollars, hundreds of groups against you. And we were a few when my brother-in-law, Dr. Mazen Najjar, was taken. People were saying, just give up. There is no point in fighting back. The papers were against us. We didn't have any coalitions. We didn't have any allies. We went there and we extended our hands to African Americans, to churches, to civic groups. And they embraced us, and they became parties. We were able to assemble a delegation that went to the Justice Department, and they had to receive that because there were thousands of people demanding that meeting. And after they met with us in 1998, they decided to take that decision by applying secret evidence at the local level all the way to the level of the Deputy Attorney General and the Attorney General herself. And since that time until September 11th, not a single case on secret evidence was approved by that department. And that came through the mobilization of the local people. We can't do it alone. We have to extend our hands to these groups. They have been there. They have seen it all these years. And then we went to the media. We started talking to editorial boards. We started giving them the facts. The government was calling it confidential information. We said, no, this is secret evidence. Where people are in front of a judge, they don't even know what they're being charged with. The government takes that judge behind closed door, talks to him, and then come back and the judge says, now you can defend yourself. What are the charges? I can't tell you. What am I supposed to say? I can't tell you. Who are the witnesses? I can't tell you. What am I supposed to defend against? It's up to you. And yet, the person is supposed to defend himself. 28 cases were as such between 96 and 98. 29 cases, 28 of which were Arabs and Muslims. It was very obvious that there is a program targeting Arabs and Muslims long before September 11th. And now it has hastened, and it has become to the point where thousands of people are being detained. We don't even know who they are. In secret. I mean, we went from secret evidence to no evidence. And that is regression. And our community did not really understand the impact of secret evidence. They thought that this is something happening to immigrants, to non-citizens, somewhere there, 28 cases, what's the big deal? Today, it's thousands of people. Thousands of people are being registered today. They have to take their fingerprints, their picture, like you're a criminal or a suspect. You have to report like you are in a parole officer. This is humiliating for the community, and we should not accept it. We had to go and talk to the different groups. And we have to explain to them, as I said earlier, get the editorial writers to sympathize with you, learn about it, make committee in every masjid, in every Islamic center, in every school, in every community. We must establish these civil rights committees by making coalitions with our friends, by demonstrating, by showing up, by speaking up, by taking a stand. The issue of academic freedom is an issue that I'm involved in, and I would like just to make a few comments upon it. Because there are powerful groups who are trying to make an example out of us. They choose few people, and once they make an example, then everybody would be afraid to speak up. Our community has been harassed in jobs. Our women has been harassed because they wear the scarves, even when they go to the mall or to grocery stores. And some of them have been afraid even to go out, especially in the aftermath of September 11th and the backlash that was taking place. And that should be an opportunity more than a threat, an opportunity to show that we are not afraid, to show that we value the freedoms in this country and that we are willing to stand up for our rights and right the wrongs and the injustices that are taking place. I have to take a stand. I have stood up. A lot of people say, why don't you give up? I can't give up. Because I believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a plan. And all what you have to do is to stand up for your right. And then whatever happens, it's from Him. We can't back down. There are powerful groups in this country who are trying to put us down, to threaten us, to put us back, so that we will not be part of the debate. We will not be part of the decision-making in this country. And we should not say no. We should not accept that. I've been sued by the president of the... I have been sued by the president of the Holocaust Museum, who said that had I been detained before September 11th, September 11th would not have happened. That I am somehow a member of Al-Qaeda, and these all kinds of things, an effort to intimidate, an effort to make us fearful, an effort to malign us and taint us. And we should stand up for our rights. We should not give up. We should not surrender. I'd like to end by asking each person here for an assignment. I'd like you, when you go back, to start researching the Patriot Act. There is so much information out there. The Center for Constitutional Rights, our friends here, have done a tremendous job in defending our rights, as other attorneys like Mara and others. ACLU, they have a wonderful section on their website. If you just simply put Patriot Act, you're going to find hundreds of articles that talks about it. Get acquainted with what it is about. You can also go to academicfreespeech.com, which is another website that we took to give you more information about academic free speech issues. And after you do that, have a committee, even a committee of one. Get more people, or just by your own self, take up that issue and say, what can I do to advance the cause of civil rights? Go and find out what other civil rights groups and individuals exist in your city or town. Talk with them. Make a coalition. Go to your neighbors. Alert them. Go to the editorial boards and insist on them taking a hard look at the Patriot Act. Get together a people who can go and visit your local mayor or city council or county commissioner. Try to have them support a resolution that will condemn the Patriot Act. We need to get hundreds of these resolutions around the nation. So come 2005, we will have hundreds of thousands of people willing to go and march in Washington, D.C., asking Congress to repeal the Patriot Act. Let me end by reminding you of what the great anthropologist Margaret Mead once said. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed individuals can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. Thank you very much.
Takbir. 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 And for the benefit of some of the people in the audience who are not Muslims and who don't know what this is all about when we say that Allahu Akbar, we're glorifying Allah, and we say that there is nothing greater, there is no power greater, there is nothing greater than Allah, than the Lord of the universe. Brothers and sisters, in the interest of time, we don't have a lot of time. I've just been told by my program chairman, and he is my program chairman, that we have to abide with the time. But I do see one brother standing here at the mic, and I'm going to ask that we respond to two questions, because some of these questions are just the same. I got three up here, but the two questions that I'm going to ask them to respond to very quickly, then I'll give this one brother the mic, and then we're going to have to conclude this session and get ready to come back for the 8 o'clock session. The two questions are, do you believe that the government, what the government is currently doing, this might be good for the our lawyer and for our executive director of the Center on Constitutional Right. Do you believe what the government is doing is against the Constitution? And if so, how do they get away with it? And the other one might require a little more length. I think it's already been answered, but nevertheless, I think we could maybe say a few things about it. It says, we already know what the problem is. I kind of debate that. What is the solution? So anyway, first of all, we want to take those two responses, and we take something from our brother at the microphone. Okay, Constitution. Is it violating the Constitution? And if so, how do they get away with it? Myra, Ron, who wants to take it?
Absolutely. The conduct of the United States government right now with the repressive mechanisms it's put in place are unconstitutional and are illegal. And the issue of getting away with it is that they can't get away with it if we stop them from doing this. And there are different ways to fight. There is fighting in the courts. As we fight in the courts at Partnership for Civil Justice, as the Center for Constitutional Rights has taken extreme leadership roles in waging these fights on unconstitutional acts since September 11th. And there is another way to fight, which is by creating a critical mass of people in the United States who are showing that they will resist and that this is not acceptable conduct from the government. You need that at the same time that you need the fight in the court system, because the judges are human and people are human, and everyone needs to see that this is not conduct that we accept. And to paraphrase Frederick Douglass, he said that, in essence, you can tell the limits of oppression because it's what people will accept. And that's what we must show, is that we will not accept this because we will fight it.
Okay. And the next question, very quickly, if we could, in terms of our response, what are some just maybe one or two practical solutions that we see in terms of dealing with this problem that we're talking about? I think our speakers really did speak to this issue, but maybe somebody might want to just highlight one particular salient factor. Dr. Daniels, I see you move towards the microphone.
Well, let me just say that I think our last speaker in particular quantified or talked about particular things that could be done.
Give him the other mic. Okay, yeah.
Is it still?
Yeah, it's good. It's much better. Go ahead.
So I think that there are several things. Number one, I think people should register and become involved in the political process, and support candidates who support the agenda that's being talked about. I see sessions here to talk about the Muslim agenda. Well, if there's an agenda, then we want candidates who support that agenda. And certainly candidates who are supporting Ashcroft and Bush in the war against terrorism and the war against Iraq are not candidates we want to support. The second thing is, our final speaker talked about the courage and convictions of getting into the streets. In the African American community in the South, it was dangerous to demonstrate. People were being killed, people were being shot down, people were being murdered, and yet people had the courage to go out and still demonstrate. So I think those are two things. And finally, I think I said in my remarks also, you have to use your economic muscle. The Muslim community in this country can no longer be ignored. The reality is, whether you're large or small should not matter, because those of us who believe in freedom and justice should not look at your numbers. But on a practical level, the Muslim community in this country is now so large, politically and economically, that if it is organized cohesively, it cannot be ignored. And I think that was a challenge the last speaker put down. My challenge is, be on the right side of history when you do it.
Okay. All right, brother, you're going to be our final comment here, and then we're going to have to get out of here, people. Thank you for your patience. Alhamdulillah.
Jazakallahu khairan. Bismillah wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulullah. Brother Mahdi Bray, thank you very much for all the work that you are doing with the Mass Freedom Foundation, and for our dear panelists for their wonderful remarks. I want to thank Dr. Aryan for mentioning briefly about the current case that is happening in Dallas right now. There are four brothers, Al-Ashi brothers, Brother Hazim, Brother Basman, Brother Bayan, and Brother Hassan, who have been arrested on Wednesday, December 18. Three of them, their homes were raided at 7 o'clock in the morning, and the Brother Hassan, who is the oldest, and who also is a U.S. citizen, was arrested while he was returning from Fajr prayer. The government is accusing them with 33 counts. Just without giving the brothers and sisters and you a lot of the details, when the government presented their case to the pre-trial judge, and when the defense responded to those allegations, the judge concluded the session with this, and I quote, "It is obvious that the government evidence is highly debatable." As a result, alhamdulillah, Brother Hassan was released 3 days later after being detained without bond, which we believe is a great victory for this case. I want to share, inshallah, in less than a minute, how the community responded, because I wanted to reaffirm what Brother Al-Aryan said in terms of getting mobilized and doing something about these things that are happening to Muslims. The Muslim community in Dallas have responded in a beautiful way. The leaders at the day of the arrest have met early in the morning. They have assigned one of the organizations that have focused in this area, the Muslim Legal Fund of America, to focus on this issue. Later on that day, all of the Muslims in the Metroplex met, and we've divided the work among 3 organizations. Mass to do the social work to make sure that these families don't miss a beat, both at home and at their business. All of these brothers work in the same company, Infocom, and the community threw their support behind them so they don't miss a beat. Mass took care of that aspect. CARE took care of all of the PR work and all the media. And the Muslim Legal Fund is taking care of all the legal issues. I think this model is going to be proven to work beautifully, and it is a model for how brothers and sisters in the Muslim communities, regardless of their affiliations, indeed can work together for the benefits of reclaiming our civil rights and how they're being eroded. Again, I want to thank you for giving me these opportunities, and I want to ask the brothers and sisters who need more details about this case. We're not asking for their support right now. Just be aware of these brothers and don't forget them from your prayer and your dua. Visit the Muslim Legal Fund of America's booth outside, and we appreciate your help, and thank you very much.
Thank you, dear brother. Takbir. Takbir. So I leave you with these thoughts, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that we are the maintainers and protectors of each other, and that Allah never changes the conditions of a people until they change that which is within them. Thank you very much. You've been a wonderful audience.